Hey everyone, welcome back to Widget Wisdom, where we simplify Flutter development. In today's video, we will be diving deep into handling user input in Flutter through text fields, buttons, and gesture detection. By the end of this video, you will know how to handle input text interacted through buttons and implement custom gestures for a rich user experience. So let's get started. And hey, if you are loving this 30-day Flutter video series, then please support us on Patreon, or you can support the channel by joining the memberships where you will get few extra perks. So now let's talk about the text fields in Flutter. So what exactly is a text field? In Flutter, text field is used to allow user to input and edit text. Whether you are building a login form, a comment box, or a search bar, this widget is crucial for capturing user data. So let's see a simple text field example. So for that, here I have opened my project. Now come inside the body and then inside the center widget, and here add a child as text field. Then here add the decoration parameter. So the decoration parameter is used to beautify the text field. So basically here I'm just adding a label text, and don't worry, we will beautify our text field after few minutes. So here add label text as enter your name. Then save the code and run the application. So now here you can see we have a text field, and we also here having enter your name as a hint text so that user can enter their name. So here we have a simple text field with the label. The decoration property allow us to add a label like enter your name, which guides the user on what input is expected. You can also add hints, icon and more to improve the UI. Now let's see how we can handle this text input. So for that, come above here and here create a text editing controller and initialize it with text editing controller. Then create a string variable as input text and assign its value as empty. So we will use this variable to store the text of the input. Now from body remove everything and here add a column widget, then add children. Then here also wrap this column widget inside a center widget and sets its column main axis alignment to the center. Now come inside the children array and here add a text field. Then for controller, assign that controller to here. Then add the decoration parameter and here add input decoration. Then add the label text as enter text. Then here add a elevated button after this text field, and then for on pressed, here add set state. And here I want that when user press onto this button, then the text values should be assigned to the input text. So for that, here add set state because I want to update the UI when user press onto this button. So here I'm adding set state, then add input text, then add controller.text. So we use controller.text because this controller holds the entered value by the user. That's why we have assigned this controller to the text field. Now for child, here add submit. Then after this elevated button, add a text widget which will say you entered, then input text. Now if you save the code and run the application, then here you can see we have a text field, a button and a text widget. Now let's enter some text. So here I'm entering widget wisdom. Now submit on this button, and here you can see the text widget is updated after pressing the button, and here it is saying you entered widget wisdom. So it is working perfectly. So in this example, we have a text editing controller to access and manage the text that the user inputs. The controller.text gives us access to the text field's value. When the submit button is clicked, the state is updated and the entered text is displayed on the screen. Text field also have various properties to improve user experience. For example, like you can specify the input type of keyboard. Like if user are entering his mobile number, then the keyboard only should show the numbers. If user are entering his email ID, then there should be @ button after the space bar. Or if user are entering his name, then there is no need to show the @ sign. So you can specify that. So let's see how we can do that. So for doing that, come to the text field widget and here add the keyboard type property. Then here add text input type. And then let's say user want to enter his email. So here add email address. Now if you save the code and run the application, then we cannot test this feature on the simulator because it don't show the keyboard. So let's close the simulator, and here let me open the Android emulator. Now just give me a minute, I'm doing this stuff very fast. Now Android emulator is opened. Now let me save the code and run the application. And here my app is installed. Now here you can see we have an @ button after this emoji sign. Now let's see if you want to show the keyboard for entering the mobile number. So for that, here add the number field. Now if you save the code and run the application, then here you can see when I tap onto this keyboard, a number pad is appearing to me. So this is how you can specify the keyboard type. Now let's add a border to beautify this text field. So for adding a border, inside the input decoration widget, here add the border property, then add the outline input border to it. So this will add a simple border around the text field. Now if you save the code, then you can see we have a border around the text field, and now our label text has been moved to the above. So this is a cool animation which can be loved by your users. Now let's wrap this text field widget inside a padding widget, and here add the symmetric padding from horizontal of 10. Now if you save the code and run the application, then you can see our keyboard is looking a bit nicer. Now let's also add the validation. Like let's assume a case where user nothing entered inside the text field and he pressed the submit button. In that case, you want to show the error to the user. So for that, come inside the elevated buttons on pressed method, and here add a check that if controller.text is null or controller.text is empty. But here we don't need this null condition because the text always having a default empty value. So please remove this condition, and then here add a scaffold messenger and then show a snack bar which will say validation failed, and then move this set state thing inside the else block. Now if you save the code and run the application and then press on this submit button, then you can see we are seeing a toast message which is saying validation failed. So this is how you can add the validation to your text field. Now let's clean this stuff from here, and now let's talk about the buttons in Flutter. So Flutter provides various types of button, each with its specific use case. Whether it's for submitting forms or navigating screens, buttons are an essential elements for interacting with your app. Now let's see a simple example of elevated button. So for that, here add an elevated button widget, and for on pressed, here just add a simple print statement that button is pressed, and for child, here add the text widget which will say click me. Now if you save the code and run the application, then you can see in the center we are seeing a button. Now let's press on this button to check its functionality. So in the console we are seeing button pressed message. So our elevated button is working perfectly. So this is a basic elevated button. When the button is pressed, it triggers the on pressed callback and prints a message in the console. The child of the button is a text widget that can be customizable. There are mainly three types of button which Flutter provides: elevated button for primary actions, outlined button for secondary action, and then we have text button for less prominent action. Now let's see each of them by a simple example. So we already have seen the elevated button. Now let's see how outlined button works. So here add an outlined buttoned widget, not outlined buttoned, outlined button. So this widget is also having two required property. First one is the onPressed function and the second one is the child. So for onPressed, just copy this from onPressed method of elevated button and add it here, and let's also add the same child to this outline button. And now let's copy this outline button and add it here. Now just change the outline button to the text button. Now if you save the code and run the application, then you can see here we are seeing all these three types of button. First one is the elevated button, second one is the outline button, and third one is the text button. So this is the example of three main button types. Each button has its own style and use cases. Elevated button is raised and add depths to the design. Outline button is a flat but with a border, making it perfect for secondary actions. Then we have text button that is just a plain text and a great for non-intrusive action. Now let's see how we can style the button. So come to the elevated button and here add a style property. Then here add elevated button dot style from, and then here add a background color, and let's set a background color of purple to it. Then add the shape Here you can see right now our button is too rounded, so we don't want that. So here add rounded rectangle border, then here add border radius and add border radius dot circular and add the radius of 10. Now if you save the code and run the application, then you can see our button is perfectly rounded how I wanted. Now but the text is not visible, so let's fix this. So for that, here add the style property of this text and then add text style widget, and here add the text color as white. Now if you save the code and run the application, then you can see our button is looking perfectly fine. So you can also customize the appearance of button using the style from method. Here we are changing the button color to purple and adding rounded corner. This level of customization allow you to create button that match your app's theme. Now let's dive into gesture handling. Flutter provides a powerful widget called gesture detector to recognize gestures like tapping, swiping, and dragging. This is crucial for adding interactive behavior to your app. Let's see a simple example of this. So for that, from here remove everything and here add a gesture detector widget. Then for on tap, here add a print statement which will say container tab, and for child, here add a container widget which will have a blue color and height and width of 100. Now if you save the code and run the application, and if you tap onto this button, then you can see in the console we are receiving the message that container is tabbed. Now let's see how we can add other operation to gesture detector. So here add on double tap function and here add a print statement that container double tapped. Then add a on long press method and here also add a print statement that container is long pressed. Now if you save the code and run the application, and if you tap on this container single time, then you can see we are receiving container tapped in console. If I double tap onto this, then container is double tapped, and if I long press onto this container, then the container long pressed message is appearing in the console. So each of these gesture can trigger a different action based on how the user interacts with the widget. Now let's see how we can detect the pen swipe. So for that, remove everything and here add on pen update, and this will give us the details. So this detail will contain the information like where the user started pressing and where it ends. So here add a simple print statement which will say swiped with the delta and details.delta. Now if you save the code and run the application and then swipe from top left to bottom right, then you can see in the console we have swiped with delta and their respective value. So this is how you can add gesture detector in Flutter. So that's a wrap up for our video on handling user input with text fields, button and gestures. You have seen how Flutter makes it easy to capture and manage user input for interactive apps. If you have not clear on any part, don't worry, we will cover more in Flutter videos. Make sure to like and subscribe, and as always, happy coding.